welcome to all those who join us in this special forum with the objective of commemorating Universal Children's Day with a presentation of the result of the study, the COVID-19 syndemic in the rights of boys, girls, and adolescents, and the analysis based on the results of the current and future challenges to defend, promote, and guarantee their rights. On December 18, the Andean Health Organization will celebrate 51 years of uninterrupted work of joint and coordinated actions with the Ministries of Health of the 6 countries, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela, with the vision of advancing in guaranteeing the right to health of the population. To begin, we will give 3 key messages. First, contribute to reduce vaccination gaps, especially in the face of the alarming situation regarding the reappearance of polio cases in the world. We urgently need to reinforce immunization campaigns so that the population can adequately comply with the vaccination schedule in each of the countries. The variants of the virus that circulated at the beginning of the pandemic have been displaced by others, and new ones will continue to emerge. Let's not give it room to continue transmitting and changing to variants that could be more lethal. Get vaccinated now and wear your mask. Every life counts. Second, the climate crisis threatens life, health, and well-being. Like any crisis, it's an opportunity to improve. You can contribute to generate social policies and a sustainable development model. Join an initiative in defense of the environment and water. Buy local products and plant-based foods. Use public transportation, cycling, and walking. Reduce consumption by reusing, repairing, and recycling. Restore our relationship with nature, the essential to recognize the ancestral knowledge of native peoples who have lived in balance with Mother Earth and practice good living. Third, the multiple and complex crises facing humanity constitute urgent challenges for the continuity of life on the planet. Among other consequences, the socioeconomic and environmental context in Latin America and the Caribbean configures a scenario in which hunger, food insecurity, and malnutrition have increased. So we invite you to leave your name, organization, country, where you're joining us, in the comment box of the Facebook Live or YouTube Live. In the same space, you can leave your questions or send them via email to webinarhorasconu@gmail.com. In this forum, we will start with institutional greetings, introduction to the presentation of the results of the study, followed by the contributions of the study by the Committee of Expanded Social Pediatrics, to move to the comments of girls, boys, and adolescents of the Advisory Council of Children and Adolescents of Peru. To access the certificate of attendance, as usual, in any of the chats of Facebook Live or YouTube Live, you will find a fixed link. You must fill a short survey and then leave your data for the issuance of the certificate. It will be sent in the coming days to your emails. To start this important day, I give the floor to Dr. Mariel Carmen Calle, Executive Secretary of the Andean Health Organization, who will give the welcome and institutional greeting. Go ahead, Dr. Calle. Thank you, Yadira. Thank you for your words. Well, we are starting the Girls, Boys, and Adolescents Rights Forum in face of the syndemia, COVID-19 pandemic and challenges for the region. The Andean Health Organization, the Politonal Agreement, was established by decision of the Ministers of Health of Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela in December 1971. Last December 18, we celebrated 50 years of uninterrupted work with the vision of advancing in the effective exercise of the right to health of the population. Since May 2020, we have been holding webinars and virtual forums with the aim of promoting continuous interlearning. At the extraordinary meeting on April 22, 2022, the Ministers of Health approved the annual operational plan, in which one of the expected results is entitled Rights of Girls, Boys, and Adolescents, and includes lines of action such as the following: neonatal health, infant health, prevention and control of child malnutrition and undernutrition, comprehensive adolescent health, participation of children and adolescents, participation in events and political advocacy from the Andean Health Organization, and the study COVID-19 syndemia and the rights of girls, boys, and adolescents. This important study was carried out through a collective work where we had the expanded Committee of Social Pediatrics of the Latin American Association of Pediatrics, ALAPE, with the participation of representatives from Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Uruguay, and the cooperation of the Pan American Health Organization and the World Health Organization. Celebrating the rights of boys, girls, and adolescents. November 20 is a very important day because it is celebrated as the Universal Children's Day and commemorates the anniversary of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of the Rights of the Child, 1959, and the approval of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, 1989. The convention has 54 articles and is the tool par excellence for the defense and promotion of the rights of children and adolescents around the world. This World Day offers us an opportunity to carry out inspiring measures to defend and promote the guarantee of their rights. The study, the COVID-19 syndemic and the rights of boys and girls and adolescents, shows us evidence that we are living through several intertwined crises: health crisis, economic crisis, educational crisis, food insecurity crisis, climate crisis. On November 20, after 2 weeks of negotiation, the climate change summit held in Egypt came to an end. And one of the most valuable achievements was the agreement to create a fund for damages and losses caused by climate change. In short, what has been sought for the past 3 decades is that the richest nations that generate most greenhouse gas emissions should contribute resources to pay for the losses and damages suffered by the people in countries that have the least impact on the problem. On the other hand, the participation of young people was highlighted in this event. The analysis of these crises and others, such as violence and orphanhood, can be found in the publication of the study. This complex picture challenges and motivates us to continue working in a coordinated manner for the full realization of the rights of children and adolescents. Welcome, ALAPE's Extended Committee on Social Pediatrics, Mirta Carategaray, Ernesto Duran, Raúl Mercer, Virginia Lopez, Iván Silva López, Ernesto Duran, Paul Guerrero, Berta Luz Pinera, Georgina Gariboto, Ernesto Rodríguez. And the Consultative Councils of Boys, Girls, and Adolescents with Xiomara and Ariadna. Welcome to all the people who are with us. Today, the Andean Health Organization, a Poly-to-None agreement, renews their commitment to and for and with boys, girls, and adolescents of the Andean countries and the countries throughout the world. We are fully convinced that boys, girls, and adolescents are not the future. They are the present, because it's a future that's being built in this present time. We are fully convinced that together we can make this full exercise of the rights of our boys, girls, and adolescents. Welcome to this forum. Thank you for your presence. After the greeting of our Executive Secretary, I introduce myself. My name is Yadira Salas. I'm a techno-pedagogue responsible for continuous education and part of the team line of action for the rights of children and adolescents in the Andean Health Organization. And today I will gladly be in charge of moderating this webinar. Next, for an institutional greeting, I will give the floor to Dr. Mirta Garategaray, Secretary of the ALAPE Social Pediatrics Committee. Go ahead, Dr. Mirta, welcome. Good afternoon to everyone, or good evening from the Social Pediatric Committee from ALAPE. We welcome everyone to this meeting where we're going to share what happened to children and adolescents during the syndemia and how this interlinking of policy, economy, and education and violence affecting the childhood of our region. We selected today because, as Mari Carmen mentioned, we are, since 1989, where the Convention on the Rights of the Children was approved on November 20 of 1954. The United Nations Assembly proclaimed the Universal Children's Day. 35 years had to pass to sign this convention, so we had the umbrella to recognize that children have rights. So for that, the group thought that it was a good day to talk about this research, where we're going to see the situation of boys and girls and become aware of the importance of work day after day for the well-being and development of boys, girls, and adolescents. And as Mari Carmen mentioned, they are not the future, they are the present. The greetings from Dr. Ileana Courier, who is the president of the Jalape Social Pediatric Committee that could not join us today. This is the welcome and opening words, and now let's go to work and to continue working together. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Mirta. We will continue with institutional greetings. I will give the floor to Dr. Carlos Agospica on behalf of the Surgeon General Problem for South America from PAHO, WHO. Go ahead, Dr. Agospica. Thank you. First of all, I would like to express our greetings and acknowledgement to the Andean Health Organization, to Dr. Maria Carmen Calle, as well as ALAPE, for organizing this event and for the kind invitation. We believe this is a very important and needed to look at the situation of health and rights of the boys, girls, and adolescents in the context of the pandemic. I would like to express the commitment from the sub-regional program for South America from the PAHO. Thank you very much. Thank you. After the institutional greetings, to give the introduction to the result of the study, syndemia, the COVID-19 syndemia in guaranteeing the rights of boys, girls, and adolescents, I welcome Dr. Ernesto Duran from the ALAPE Social Pediatrics Committee. Dear Dr. Duran, come on, you have the floor. Thank you. Good afternoon. Good evening in many countries of the region. Well, it's very important to meet to commemorate these 33 years of the convention. I'm going to make an introduction to the work that we're going to discuss. Can you show me the presentation, please? Next, please. Well, the Social Pediatrics Committee wanted to express that we have been working and we continue being committed to working to guarantee the rights of boys, girls, and adolescents of our region and from the world. Next slide. Well, this working initiative arises from a proposal from ISOP. This is the International Society of Social Pediatrics, was anticipated to the fact in June of first year of the pandemic, call upon the different countries in the continent to reflect on the critical situation that we're going through. And as you can see, at that time, they anticipated that the pandemic or syndemic, like we see it, will have a severe impact on the rights of children and adolescents, and they will demand a mobilization to which, and the product of these, the Latin American group of social pediatrics made up by the expanded Social Pediatric Committee to this call, and we start working on these topics where we have generated several papers like we're going to present today, one of them about policies that was published last year. Next slide. Well, we define the situation generated in terms of the pandemic as a syndemic, understanding syndemia as the pooling of a number of social and situations of other diseases and problems that are different to health, together with climate change, social inequality, poverty, racial discrimination, and is going to affect all the human clusters and the entire world in general, including nature as it is expressed in this slide. And from the family to institutions such as school, working spaces, health centers, hospitals, etc., and also the country's economies and the global economy, productive systems, well, the life of everyone is going to generate a systemic crisis, as we see in the upper portion, this economical, social, cultural, and environmental crisis. As Dr. Calle mentioned, health and education too, which is also what we're going to look during this presentation. And also the issue of how humankind is facing this crisis, from what political, social perspectives are they looking at it, to have a comprehensive look at the syndemic as we're going to analyze this phenomena in today's meeting. Next slide. So we, in this space, we're going to present the results of this work, the impacts and challenges that we hope that this is a study that we could continue in time, and it collects this initial concern of what will be the impact that this is having in the lives of the new generations, what are the impacts in the future, and the question of what challenges are these proposing, what do we need to do and to respond to this situation. What we're going to present next is not exactly the study itself. We will not have the time. Today, we would like to present some insights considering that there was a participation of 6 countries, as you can see in the maps: Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Uruguay. Each of one of these countries is going to present a short reflection of what they found in a national study, and later on, the person who participated as a research advisor will present some more general reflections or insights on the study. So this can invite us when we make the publication to learn about it, to study, and so it can help us to build a better future and how to reconstruct everything that, as we see, has been severely affected with the syndemia. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Duran. I would like to highlight what you mentioned about the commitment to continue working in guaranteeing the rights of both girls and adolescents of the region. And as you mentioned, the pandemic demands a joint effort in terms of the syndemia, which is what we are presenting for the region. We reiterate our thanks for this introduction, and we extend our invitation for you to continue joining us today. Continuing with the program agenda for the moderation of the following segment, I will give the floor to Raúl Mercer. Go ahead, Raúl. You have the floor. Thank you, Yadira. Thank you to the institutions who are participated in this event. And for everyone who's joining us today, we may say that this event, as opposed to other webinars to which you are used to participate, has different characteristics. Despite the institutional rigor and the organization of this activity, there is an issue that goes beyond the images, which is what was generated throughout the pandemic that, as you know, had many consequences, and one way or the other has affected all of us who are here present today. So we have all paid the negative consequences of this situation that has affected different orders of our personal, professional lives. And behind all of this, we could see a good portion of the pandemic that during this period, we, from the group of social pediatrics, generate a dialogue space, an understanding space of friendship, why not, where the relationship and the empathy and the emotional aspects favor this interwoven of joint work. And for those of you who don't know of social pediatrics, just to tell you that this is a space where we try to approach the childhood problem from social determinants perspective and public health perspective and the perspective of rights and equity. You don't need to be a pediatrician to be part of the group of social pediatrics, just need to be committed for health and quality of life of childhood from this perspective that I've mentioned before. So what we're going to see today is going to be a quick travel through the 6 countries of this region, where each country had made a brief reflection and synthesis based on a number of questions that we have shared, where you were able to see that there are a lot of similarities as well as heterogeneous or diversity that from each country. So what we're going to see, to what extent social pediatrics have helped us and continues to help us in characterizing not only the present, as Ernesto mentioned, but to see the future. What future are we leaving the children of our world, in particular Latin America, with this traumatic experience that's still generating negative consequences? So this joint reflection space transcends the epidemiological and infectious characteristic of the pandemics to look at the endemic aspects of the particular case of children's, boys and girls. The issue of infected occupy the second place. This has to do more to those affected than those infected. And there's no doubt, though, the affection of the population, of pediatric population, was greater to the specific problems of the interaction of the virus and the virus with persons. For that, and having an alphabetic criteria, we're going to invite colleagues and friends from each country so they can make a presentation related to their own context. And for the particular case of Argentina, the questions that we're going to share with the three countries are the same in terms of highlighting the most significant aspect of the functional studies, see what were the lessons learned, and finally, what challenges do we have ahead from this learning. So I'm going to ask Virginia Lopez Casarigo, the speaker of Argentina, to tell us who are you, Virginia? Not a formal presentation, just tell us who are you, what's your profession, who are you representing, and what's your working group. And once you finish your brief presentation, we'll give you a space for your presentation. Go ahead, Virginia. Good afternoon. I thank for the invitation to participate not only in this space, but in all the road that we are sharing with the study. I'm Virginia Lopez Casariego. I'm a pediatrician. I'm presently coordinating a social pediatrics postgraduate studies with rights and learnings, and I'm a member of the National Committee of Social Pediatrics of the Argentinian Pediatric Society, together with Mirta Gategaray, who just recently heard, and Erika Hammer-Muller, another member of this space, organized several decades ago and renewed with new voices every year. So we will move on to the presentation. Can- Well, next slide. So these are names.
Mirta y mío, y pasamos
Erika, Mirta, and myself. Go to the next slide, where the intention was to describe the concept of syndemia in terms of social Latin American social medicine trajectory, with some valuable examples at the first Ministry of Health of our country. And when these issues about the determinations and social construction of health disease concepts are taken by the World Health Organization. So we go to this question that Raúl shares about the impact of the pandemic syndemic in our childhood. We go to the next slide. The first situation, the first key that we would like to share with you is this situation regarding the child poverty and inequality that has become worse in our country from the starting with this pandemic, despite that there were public policies put in place that specifically included both girls and adolescents. Despite that, this tendency remain at unacceptable levels. We say that the poverty recorded by income is just on the faces of the several inequalities of the population, the country. As an example of situations to highlight are the food security indicators. In this case, they important to point out that while we have alarming levels of malnutrition, there are situations that are ethically, politically unacceptable as hunger that got worse during the syndemia, and also leads us to think in the complexity of these problems, including the eating disorders, more frequent in adolescents, and general form of discrimination, such as fat phobia, which at least in our country, is registered very early in life. Now, in relation to child development, we carry out several interviews to key informants on this topic, in addition to the reading of other research, and they all agree in change in sleeping, eating, and communication habits. And here we would like to add a concern and a question in relation of how are we going to read these development indicators and learning indicators if we're going to consider this exceptional time. Are we going to consider the same indications developed for other times? So we're going to find epidemics of speech delay, and we're going to consider these indicators in the situational with regards to how exceptional is the situation that we've been living through these recent years. Also, another of the impacts that we think that are important to highlight is that the access to care should be adapted to the needs of children and adolescents, should always include as a core portion a mental health approach and enabling their active listening and participation of boys, girls, and adolescents, as it was mentioned by the previous speakers, Maria del Carmen and Mirta. They are the present, and as such, they help us to think in the present and the future. Well, we also highlight some situations that are invisible, such as the situation of institutionalized children and adolescents who presented the greatest suffering. The next slide. In terms of learnings, the other question that Raúl invited us to answer, clearly the virological approach is part of the problem. So the vaccines have been very important, and with the emphasis that the access to vaccines should be universal and can be experienced by boys, girls, and adolescents. The family as a right is not a comprehensive solution to the problem. So we propose other negative indicators such as poverty and others that need to be considered as problems to highlight the depth of these problems. I don't know if I'm running out of time. Well, let's go to the next slide. We're doing fine, Virginia. I will let you know with time, so don't worry. Cool. I heard this noise and I thought my time was up. There are two perspectives in all countries coincide. That from a proposal from Ernesto Rodriguez, that was the generational and multiple inequality perspectives. So in all the public policies, there will all be presence to look boys, girls, and adolescents. Listening and participation are indispensable parts of the problem and understood as a right. But we would also like to mention not everything was suspended during the pandemic, syndemic. Actually, some social movements that were previously active were able to keep their social participation, such as the feminist, transfeminist collective that allow not only to care for specific demands of women and pregnant women, but also in the 1,000 days law, the problem of the early infancy. Now we'll go to the next slide. As I mentioned, Erika, Mirta, and Sol, we are the social pediatric committee. So first, we are proposing what could be our contribution and what can we build from this society that we're part of. And we are proposing to make social pediatrics visible as a necessary reading for the comprehensive approach of health of boys, girls, and adolescents with a human rights approach. promote the analysis of social determinants, impact, and challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic syndemic as a powerful analyzer of the health disease care processes of children and adolescents. Promote the coordination of multiple internal spaces at the central and federal level in our institution in pursuit of common purposes. To emphasize the positioning of our institution as a social actor with a capacity to coordinate with other social actors in the defense of the right to health and life of children and adolescents. And to emphasize the relevance of collective work with other countries in our Latin America region, both in the exchange of experiences and as in the commitment to common challenges. Well, we will continue. So, and we're going to we're closing my presentation, and we have the challenges for us as health workers. In this case, we always take something that comes from the most academic area with this Benasayak material of humor provided by our dear analyst as keynotes and adolescents and young kids who built or are part of this social movement of movie productions that build this concept. Boys and girls are not dangerous. We are in danger. And from there, we as workers, as a team, setting aside any omnipotence pretension, but trying to put ourselves in the power of being able to transform today and now our working spaces and research spaces, study spaces, teaching spaces, attempting not to be captured by these sad passions that many times we read the psychic suffering of boys, girls, and adolescents. From there, our invitation from the entire team that we work, but also from all our social pediatrics committee from Argentina, to continue thinking together with other countries in the region, to continue learning, reflecting, and being able to contribute not only statements, but also new questions that will open the road to new knowledge. Well, thank you very much. I hope I spoke, interpret with, I hope I collaborated. It was, and thank you very much. Thank you, Virginia. Right on time. So now we invite, and we're going to cross the Andes to go to the north to Calama to rescue a very dear voice of a friend, who's Ivan Silva, who will bring Chile's voice. Ivan, why don't you tell us who you are for those who don't know you, and then you have the space for your presentation. Go ahead, Ivan. Thank you, Raul. Good afternoon to everyone. It's a pleasure and emotional to be present in so many friends. Well, I'm Ivan Silva. I'm a pediatrician. I've trained in social pediatrics in the Ilir Institute of Barcelona University, and I chair the Social Pediatrics Committee of the Pediatric Association, and my city is part of the network, the intersectorial network and the regional network with the Antofagasta region. This is what I do. Can you show me the slides, please?
La siguiente. Brevemente, el equipo que formó el
This is the team that generated the report. Daniela Diaz Calarros, Natalia Bozo, they're part of the Observatory of Childhood and Adolescent, a fantastic observatory who provides yearly reports on the childhood in children, and they worked with me this interesting effort. This is the situation shown where we started with the pandemic by analyzing the impact on boys, girls, and adolescents, and that we can see in the map from the Golf and Bennett diagrams. From these children at the center, we started to see with this pandemic that fortunately in April, except the quarantine on March, in April, with a lot of clarity and vision, the Committee of the Rights of Child in the United Nations sent a declaration to the countries to take into consideration that even though children were not greatly affected by the virus, the consequences that they will experience following that we're going to be like we are seeing now are quite serious. So we're going to see each one of the areas where children live, how different problems, serious problems are arising. Next. And this is another graph that I always say that this concept that has to do with the problems that boys, girls are living. We could talk, have a webinar for each one of these issues because each one implies an issue that were not seen at that time. Among the most important highlights of our study, one of the things that really hit us the unequal situation between territories with different socioeconomic preconditions. We could appreciate how the vulnerability of that population with threat of specific losses such as health and employment, and that this continue or were followed by another terrible situation that would lead such a social explosion that affected the roots of our institutionality, issues that still have us in serious problems, and what is really occurring on who have the power. So that all those things had a strong impact on the territories with these specific losses, and the authority was proposing. So we need to lock down to deal with that, to this situation, but we need to consider all the threats on a daily basis with the loss of health and loss of employment. And this is just a map where you can see those with regards to mortality. This is the metropolitan area, those areas where there was more mortality by COVID were precisely those communities with larger socioeconomic problems. So what lessons learned? First of all, the lack of official information available for reporting information on boys, girls, and adolescents, particularly with regard to their participation, and especially the information on the most vulnerable populations, women, migrants, indigenous people. That today we have to rescue those things that were not analyzed at the beginning. The second thing that we learned is we have to integrate the participation of both girls and adolescents in the state's measure or responses to emergency situation. It seemed a clear idea to close the schools. That meant that they need to go home. In our country, it's close to 3 million boys and girls, and to start seeing that what's going to come next to what we see today. The violent situations, suicide attempts, bullying, and learning disabilities or disorders. So we need to have to invest a lot to be creative how to we deal with these things. And they are proposing that all the education may be the cornerstone to face that impact. Another lesson learned is the seek of mechanisms to ensure the guarantee of other rights. For example, what our children suffer in the maintenance of primary health controls and services, in maintenance of school, and or early stimulation activity in the case of kindergartens. Another lesson learned was the living condition of family and communities living in poverty. Building effectively universal social protection systems operating from a rights-based approach. The challenges in guaranteeing rights, the rights of children and adolescents, has been particularly critical in countries of the region, although there are notable differences between those who belong to households affected mainly by poverty and social exclusions and those who are part of the high-income households with everything in their favor. And there, in our country, we look into how to materialize the law of guarantees and the protection of children and adolescents in their territories with the universal social protection that provides boys, girls, and adolescents a minimum floor to respond to health emergencies such as COVID, such other emergencies, to the lack of social cohesion in many of these territories. And here I will talk about the rights of all children and adolescents that were affected, Article 24. When they talk about the rights of children and adolescents to optimal healthcare, but they close the medical facilities to prioritize adults. Hospital wards were closed to favor adults. The right to education was also affected. There we have the fundamental tool as a challenge to discuss with the people from education so we can start a new type of education that has been until been so far with subject that has a different way of looking at life. There's a major challenge there. All children and adolescents, almost with exception, including with disabilities and daughters and sons of migrants, was impaired, such as the right to maintain their survival, their optimal development, and the quality of life, the best interest of the child. And that was overwhelmed, and the right to participate in decisions that affect them, and the right to the necessary information. We wanted to see in situations that we to continue to go through this flagrant aggression of this autocentric society. Next. And this study asked what were the contributions to the Latin American social pediatrics. As Virginia mentioned, we would like to say that Latin American social pediatrics is a tool for analysis and management. Analysis, review, establishment of strategies, since the existence of unequal collective inequity, lack of social cohesion have once again become evident. The analysis of social determinants of health, we believe that we are a branch of pediatrics. It's always been mentioned that the pediatrics has to do with the social characteristics. The ideology of Latin American social pediatry has to do with the performance and approach to two problem areas: children's health problems due to social problems and health problems with social consequences. There is another element that we can put our second flag. And finally, to strengthen the follow-up of the postulate of the Convention of the Rights of the Child, where social pediatricians in Latin America become guarantors of rights, so we can stop with that unfairness in our territory. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Ivan, for letting us inside your house and meet you and learn about your environment where the Chilean boys and girls live their realities. Thank you for bringing the boys from Chile. For the people that are listening to us at this point, you are flavoring or feeling the taste of the significance of social pediatrics in terms of the differential read of the childhood beyond the symptoms, analyzing the context and living conditions, the environments, the surroundings, the political situations, the turbulence, and how this affects the reality of children. So we are on the right track. So now we're going to give the floor to a person who in image is going to look very familiar because he did the opening of this session. I'm talking about Ernesto Duran, who will bring the voice from Colombia. So Ernesto, your presentation, please. I ask you if you could comment for the audience, where do you work? And I understand that in addition of your participation, as well as Maria Lucia, you're part of the team that represents your country. Go ahead, you have the floor. Thank you, Raul, once again to present our insights from our country. I'm a social pediatrician, and I'm part of the Colombian group of social pediatrics that have been working in this study in this topic for several years. And I'm an active part of this Latin American group of pediatricians work on this topic on the rights of the children. And I would also like to take the opportunity, something that I forgot in my presentation to the region, that as a group, we would like to give a special thanks to the Horas CONU and the sub-regional group of Pan American Health Organization for South America that have supported this study and are supporting us today in this event and with the entire process. So my special thanks for them. Well, could I see the first slide? As Raul mentioned, I work with Maria Lucia Mesa, my colleague. I would like to start with this reflection of the context. We cannot understand these impacts that we have lived if we don't consider how we got here, the previous situation. Colombia and the region in general, like Chile and others, we are countries of great inequalities and inequities. And this is a large frame to understand that the world has suffered has helped to increase that inequalities and inequities. And in general, we are countries that have outstanding debt with children's rights, as this slide mentions. This is Colombia as a country that shows well in guaranteeing the rights. Now, the other context would be the COVID-19 response, because it depends on how we responded as a country or a social organization. I think that clearly the response to COVID has been an adult-centric response. It was focused on adults because of this concern in terms of the disease, but it was not only the disease, but everything else. Children were the last one to go out. They were not asked. Everything had to do with adults. Regarding COVID, this is the tradition of this region. We're an adult-centric society, and also the protecting the society. They have two large models of state response. There was a protection to production, the industries, the capital, and the protection to people, before people. And this is the difference is where we choose the priority. In my country, in the government of that time, which, like in Chile, generates important social movements that help with the transformation. There was a response protecting capital before people. So this also explains some of the impacts generated by this situation. And the other thing is that being a centralized country, it was a similar response like in our national history that was centralized in the national government and many times decontextualized of the diverse realities that a country like Colombia had, that has highlands, has the two oceans, has plains, has Amazon jungle, has several and deserts, etc. Diversity of regions that were dealing with different situations before the pandemic and that faced different situations during the syndemia. The impacts were more indirect than direct. I would like to show the poverty issue, the extreme poverty and poverty in general, showing what we show about the intergenerational inequalities. As you can see in the slide, the poverty in children is larger than the general population. And those under the age of 5 in their first infancy reach 56.6% and extreme poverty to 21.6%, very high levels. There was an increase in inequalities, and the other characteristic was the increase of food insecurity, school backwardness, and the coverage and quality of education was affected. We haven't evaluated yet, but a recent study from the World Bank talk about a catastrophe, educational catastrophe, 1 to 8 years of schooling for our countries following to what we have suffered in this period, an important impact, as Ivan mentioned, on healthcare and an impact on the new generation development and a critical topic, which is the invisibilization of childhood and adolescence. Here we see the chart to try to show all these multiple impacts. We haven't spoken about the impact on mental health, for example, that are critical and that continue to be critical, and the levels of mental health impairment has maintained in this year, that although we're coming out of the pandemic, but there's also another issue, which is the intrafamily violence that was measured through the reports to the protection system. There was a doubling of the violence, in particular with children, more than double between 2019 and 2021. There was also an increase in sexual abuse. So these other situations add up to these different difficult contexts where the children spend their life during this period that affected their life in many ways. Well, the lessons and challenges. As Ivan mentioned before, we need to learn from the crisis and be prepared for new crisis. There's a new reality. We came back to the same reality or even a worse reality in issues like mental health, and we are not evidencing the possibility that we are moving in Colombia, at least in the north of the continent. We have a crisis because of flooding, weather, and severe environmental crisis that is challenging us, and we are not learning of this process that we need to work. And this principle that was included in the convention and is included in the rights in the crisis, one of the priority populations to care for are the children. Which happened in COVID-19, and we should not forget about that important principle. And at this moment, that the inequities and inequality have exacerbated both in between ethnic groups and in the cities, and gender inequalities and intergenerational, we need to approach that inequality should be in the center of the political situation. So we need policies that guarantee the comprehensive protection of children and the resources for children, because they had decreased during this pandemic. So we need to guarantee resources. And we should seriously think that we, as a continent, as a region in South America, to eliminate hunger. This is a critical, fundamental goal that we should set a short deadline. And we also need changes in the political, health, education, and economic systems. Private health doesn't respond differently to public health in terms of the crisis. We should develop new models for health. We need new education models. We need to recover everything that was lost during this type of syndemia. And the proposal is like going back to the old school. We don't even think in this crisis and what it generated and how can we recover what was lost, and with also with new economic systems. So we urgent need to change this hedonistic and consumist culture, not respecting the environment, and build a new culture. And finally, we need, as it has been said by the previous speakers, a new citizen culture and active citizenship that includes the voice of our boys and girls. These are the reflections from my country. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ernesto. Thank you, Maria Lucia, although you're not present in video. Well, you've seen that Ernesto and the one who's preceded him in refer what such and that colleague mentioned. So this is a reflection to evidence that in the group we hear each other, and in addition to that, we try to understand what happens in our countries, and also this is a learning space. And the valuable of this is this is a genuine learning from the own realities of Latin America regarding the information from other contexts and other. This is based on local knowledge or local reality. And now we will move on to Ecuador. We're going to ask Paul Guerrero to come to this space and to ask you, Paul, if you could make a brief introduction of yourself, followed by your 10-minute presentation or less. Go ahead, Paul. Thank you, Raul. Good evening, everyone who are following us. I'm Paul Guerrero. I'm a monitoring and evaluation official of UNICEF in Ecuador, and it's a pleasure to be with you to share some elements that I believe are the most important of the study that's been carried out. Would you kindly please show my slides? Thank you very much. The impact of syndemia in children and adolescents in Ecuador. It is clear that the socioeconomic crisis has been exacerbated by COVID-19. It has affected the well-being of children and adolescents in the family in different ways. And to look at this, we took some issues, the home economy, food security, comprehensive health, education, and care as things that can allow us to see what was happening with boys and girls and adolescents, and what do we find? What do we find? The affections, the inequality, and they were exacerbated during the pandemic. And to look at those differences, I invite you to look in the left side, the poverty and extreme poverty by income. As you can see, the percentage of homes without children in poverty was 7.2% in 2019, pre-pandemic. But when we look at the percentage of homes by income with children, homes with children, poverty went up to 26.2%. And there were these in pre-pandemic inequalities. And of course, when the pandemic arrived, we see the data from 2021. Poverty in these homes without children went from 7.2 to 10.7. And in the case of the homes with children, rose from 26 to 30. So almost 1 or 3 homes with children was in a situation of poverty. On the other hand, in the right side, you see the social investment with regard to the GDP, comparing 2019 and 2020. And as you can see, Ecuador is the second country who grew less of that social investment with regards to GDP, only following Uruguay. And as Dr. Castillo and Mariño pointed out, only 12% of households in 2018 who had boys, girls, and adolescents active head of household had non-contributory protection. It's the lowest compared to Uruguay, Chile, Peru, Argentina, and Colombia. So, and there was important inequality where the most affected were the homes with children, and the response, as we see from this publication from ECLAC, was one of the lowest in Ecuador, measured through the increase in social investment with regards to GDP. And continuing the same line of Ernesto in terms of hunger, what we saw taking information from a national telephone survey in 2020, October, compared to February 2022. Nationwide, 1 of 2 homes is in a situation of food insecurity that's moderate or severe. But beyond that, what I would like you to look is that between October of 2020 and February 2022, there's no major change. It seems that it tends to increase. But once again, looking beyond this national average, what we can see is that homes without children have a percentage of food insecurity of 40.8%, almost 41. But in homes with children, the percentage with food insecurity goes up to almost 55%. That is an important gap. And if we start to look by socioeconomic level, we'll see that the lowest socioeconomic level in February of this year had a 70% of food insecurity in the homes. Now, as Ernesto mentioned during his presentation, there's an issue that has been strongly affected, and this is mental health. So this telephone survey, the unit observation was the home, and they asked if the child, boys or girls or adolescents had new behaviors, if they reported emotional situations as being aggressive or nightmares. And in 7 of 10 homes, their children had suffered at least one emotional situation. Especially and with higher prevalence, we saw that was to be sad, to be aggressive, stubborn, or new fears. That has not changed since February to October of 2020. 7 out of 10 households report that there was at least one emotional situation. On the other hand, in the left side, you can see that children and girls who study with virtual education, you see nationwide, 1 out of 4 households with children between 5 and 11 years had access to virtual education through a computer, only 1 out of 4. And in the right side, 73, almost 3 out of 4 homes with children between 5 and 11 years had access through a cell phone. So you can imagine how it's to attend school with one cell phone, and if there's one more child in the home, they will have to take turns. So virtual education was not an option for everyone. And that gap, that educational catastrophe that Ernesto mentioned, has a very high risk that the gaps would have exacerbated because of this unequal access to education. What are, therefore, the pending challenges? First, that economic recovery, although limited in the case of Ecuador, must be inclusive. It's an opportunity to reduce, and the growth model is inclusive and not exclusive. We need to improve the coverage and quality of social protection systems, especially for households with children and adolescents, because as you have seen, they were the most affected, and they should have had a stronger response. We need to increase and improve the efficiency of social investment, especially in services aimed at the youngest children. There's evidence about the benefits or returns of investment are higher the earlier they are. And that's going to help to decrease the existent inequalities in the country.
Coincidimos con lo que decía Ernesto, que los compromisos del Estado con la
The state's commitments to the International Convention on the Rights of the Child bring on greater importance and this commitment should be reflected with this convention in the budgets, programs, and projects that ensure and contribute to exercise the universal rights of children and adolescents. Finally, studies like this, a regional study, make it possible to look at a global problem because it was a global problem, and its effects also allow us to see the heterogeneous effects in the different countries, but also inside the countries and between countries. This type of studies allow us to generate a platform for exchange this learning, like Raúl mentioned, a learning space, and to exchange learnings, and also how can we act in a coordinated fashion. Thank you very much. Thank you, Paul, for your brilliant presentation, for clarifying and giving us new lights from the specific reality of Ecuador. I understand that the people are enjoying this presentation. And for those of you who are not part of the 6 countries that make up this study, do a self-analysis of the reality of your own countries and add to this consortium of countries and professionals that are interested and concerned for the reality of the children because of the syndemic. We have 2 more countries to go. So we're going to invite Peru with Berta Luz Pineda, who she's going to show us the Peruvian experience. Berta has a multiple role in our group as a facilitator, as a host, and with his warm voice, why not, generating a climate of empathy and closeness among all of us who participate in this experience. So, Berta, thank you for your continuous support and your commitment in managing this process. So Berta, you have the floor. Would you like to talk about yourself first? And then you continue with the presentation. Go ahead, Berta. Thank you, dear Raúl. Thank you to everyone. It's been a privilege to work with this wonderful team of the expanded Committee of Social Pediatrics. I talk on behalf of the Andean Health Organization team. My warm greetings to all of you who listen to us. We have Dr. Maria Carmen Calle, who's a pediatrician, and she is a fighter for the rights of boys, girls, and adolescents. I'm a sociologist, specialized in postgraduate training in environmental management, sustainable development. And in the Andean Health Organization, I coordinate very interesting topics of very challenging situations like climate change and social inequalities, health economics, and I also have the joy of contributing in the strategic line of the rights of boys, girls, and adolescents. Thank you very much, and can I see my first slide, please? This is the team with 2 members from the ORAS. Dr. Calle emphasized that the COVID-19 pandemic is not the only crisis. There are several crises, and so I don't repeat all her comments of the multiple crises. Remember that the crisis also propose challenges and opportunity for change and transformation. In the study, as we mentioned, this is the areas to evaluate have been the socioeconomic, the rights to health, development, protection, and we have emphasized the socioeconomic impact in guaranteeing the rights. And I would just like to add a new concept, which is the intersectionality, understood as the structural margination, multiple disadvantages that intersect with identities and problems and vulnerations of the rights related, for example, with a socioeconomic status, the age, the ethnic origin, and disability. And all of this contributes to show structural inequalities. So the exercise that we do of analysis are instrumental, especially for decision making, and to contribute to build more equal societies in exercising the human rights and nature. Next. I will talk about one of the problems that we have identified in the study in Peru, and that's orphanhood, a hidden pandemic. Between 2020 and April of 2021, there were more than 1 million boys, girls, and adolescents who experienced the death of their primary caregivers worldwide. Recent data tells us that there are approximately 7 million boys, girls, and adolescents in orphanhood. It also tells us that for every 2 people who died from COVID-19, 1 child or adolescent is orphaned. Remember that the studies and the evidence shows us that children, boys and girls or adolescents who lose primary caregivers are at a greater risk of experiencing mental health problems, physical, emotional, and social violence, family poverty, among many other issues. Therefore, it is a priority to strengthen the response, prevent, detect, respond, and care for boys, girls, and adolescents. In this slide, if we compare the countries who are members of the Andean Health Organization, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela, and the observing countries which are part of these studies, Argentina and Uruguay. Peru is a country with the highest problem of orphanhood. 100, so many children that have become orphan because their mother, father, or caregiver died. In several studies in the pediatric committee, we did a study on the holistics. Then there's been efforts to respond and some efforts to develop policies to guarantee the rights of the child and to give response to the problems. And one of these measures was financial assistance of 200 soles, approximately $55 per month, to children and adolescents whose father, mother, or both have died during the health emergency due to the COVID-19. November of 2021, there were more than 5,000 boys, girls, and adolescents who had access to this help. In May of 2022, more than 17,000. The pandemic also have left us some laws, regulations, and policy. For example, in the case of Peru, Law 31405 and the Supreme Decree has a regulation of this law, 007-2022, propose the need to promote the protection and comprehensive development of children and adolescents who are orphans, not only because their parents have died by COVID, but there's also an effort to provide protection to boys, girls, and adolescents who are in other situations of marginality or extreme poverty. It established economic assistance and professional accompaniment to guarantee health, education, life project, and comprehensive development. They grant the economic assistance with 200 soles per month that it remains in effect until the age of 18. It creates the integrated system of monitoring and accompaniment of orphan boys, girls, and adolescents. The high-level multi-sectorial commission for the protection of orphan children and adolescents was created. The lessons learned were in the sense that with this effort that we need to do for their development, this is an historic moment with a window of opportunity to make the right decisions. There is a regulatory framework starting by the Convention on the Rights of the Child that we're celebrating today. The rules of the game. It's very important that we should always do all the necessary efforts to comply and to develop new regulations and policies in response to the problems. The COVID-19 pandemic had an impact on the design of public policies, but the politics imply that has to be developed, so it's essential to contribute and to make them effective in guaranteeing rights. The guarantee of rights requires progress in the construction of a social state of law and welfare with universal health and social protection systems. These challenges remind us that we can all have a protagonic role. In terms of the challenges, remember that we highlight the significant experience of participation of boys, girls, and adolescents in the consultative councils. We have them in the country, but also at the regional level, we had many instances such as the Social Pediatric Committee for analysis and sharing of experience and to make progress in guaranteeing the rights of boys, girls, and adolescents based on intersectoral and transdisciplinary work capacities with the real participation of girls, boys, and adolescents, and transdisciplinary at the national, regional, and international levels. Conduct transdisciplinary and multi-country research, for example, situation of orphan children, and link those research results to decision-making to achieve solutions from economic policies to strengthen social protection systems that are sensitive to the rights of the child and to strengthen the regional integration and international cooperation. The Animal Health Organization, with the leadership of Dr. Maria Carmen Calle, is fully committed to continue strengthening this type of effort. Thank you so much. Thank you, Berta Luz, and through you, of course, to the Andean Health Organization for the important effort, and in you in particular for bringing this issue of orphanhood as a significant emergency in Peru, in addition to the response in terms of social protection policies and the comment that you mentioned that we are at an historical moment and a window of opportunity. The question is if we are at the level of the circumstances to improve the answers responses from the countries to put children in the middle. Thank you, Luzberta, and we go to the last presentation. We're somewhat running out of time, but the presentations are so rich. So we invite our dear colleague, Georgina Gaributo from Uruguay for her presentation. Georgina is a colleague and friend, so please could you tell something about you in terms of your current work, and then use your time for your presentation with the report from Uruguay. Hello. I have the good news that in general, I'm very limited in words, and because I'm the last one, there are many things in common with the previous presentations. I'm going to try Not to repeat too much, I'll introduce myself, Georgina Garabota, I'm a sociologist by training. I have a master in human development, and I work in the Ministry of Social Development in Uruguay. Uruguay grows with you in knowledge management with a follow-up of programs and to generate knowledge and promote research, carry out surveys, generate this information that is useful to promote public policies of childhood. In recent times, I've also been working at the regional level because I think that we have knowledge accumulated in this region, in particular in the early childhood and child development, where I have been working, and I'm convinced of this. I'm working on these topics that have to do to get together and accumulate knowledge with the excellent experts that we've been having in this region in recent years. That's my introduction. And well, actually, the report was made with Materia de Souza, Natalia de Souza. She participates in one of the group meetings, and we've worked in collecting the information and data. The report was made together with Ernesto Rodriguez, and the idea is to find that mention that in Uruguay, in comparison with the region, we have global indicators that are more adequate in general in what has to do with social development, technological field, and general democratic functioning. Because of the characteristic of our country that's quite small, we have 3 point something million inhabitants. We had lowest levels of infection and a lower number of deaths due to COVID-19. We were able to achieve an early vaccination, and now we have approximately 83% of coverage in adults and 50% in children. And we have the SAVAL plan, which is an educational politics that was in force at least 10 or 12 years, where we had a computer per child. So the pandemic in terms of connectivity and access was worked like a relative advantage, although it is not perfect and we have many criticisms that you're going to hear from, but we have some very interesting characteristics to deal with the pandemic. And it was a country with the fewest school closure days because of the population characteristics, especially for some areas of very scattered populations. Next slide. However, the inequality that we have in the region persists in Uruguay. And for example, we have poverty by income is 11 times higher among those under 18 than those over 65, although the inequality challenges us that we do have the possibility of being more equitable with boys and girls. And the same with respect to the social spending. Together with Chile and Argentina, we have the highest proportion of social spending. However, there's a lot of accumulation in the elderly. Social protection is GDP is smaller for education as compared to what is allocated for childhood. Next. And here is where I'm going to repeat some of what my colleagues have already mentioned, because during the pandemic, there was an amplification of different different problem that already existed before the pandemic, but we did see an increase, and here we have selected of the highlights of the study where we had more impact in terms of violence against children and adolescents, but also intrafamily violence in general, where in 2021 there was an increase by 43% of reports compared to 2020, and it had already increasing compared to previous year, but the action on the domestic economy, the confinement did affected this and generated situations of violence. In the issue of mental health, we have the highest suicide rates in the region, and in the adolescents, it's been a strong impact, and the self-harm attempts have been more frequent and with a large increase. Food insecurity. At the beginning of the pandemic, 17.4% of households experience a type of food insecurity. Now I just opened the documents because I must have been mistaken, because the colleague from Ecuador pointed out there was a 70% of food insecurity, and but actually this is the information of food insecurity. But if we compare between household with children and without children, we also see these differences that we saw in previous presentations. The punishment to households who have children is clearly seen if there are no political response that provides some help to these families. And with respect to the participation of children, some questionnaires were applied, and physical and virtual spaces for consulting were created, but I believe personally that this is quite insufficient, that what's being done in terms of effective participation of boys and girls and adolescents, the major challenges. Well, here, the lessons learned, what has been observed is the strong impact on mental health. We're just starting to see the effects, and that are going to continue, linked to suicide, as I mentioned before, but some other issues related to what comes later in the confinement situation for boys and girls, and the violence and the loss of recreation spaces and things that have to do with social emotional skills, that we're just starting to be in contact with children as to develop the severity or the level of issue that we're going to anticipate in this regard. And then in the food area, in eating habits and also reconciliation of sleep are some of the areas that have also been affected, mostly because of the economic situation in terms of food, and sleep has to do with the alteration of the daily routines. So the challenges, repeating what has been previously said, the defense of the best interests of the child at all levels, the mental health response should multiply, especially for adolescents, and to poverty has focused on households with multiple deprivations and hard hit by the socioeconomic crisis and the violence issue that I already pointed out. And the most important challenges, I think that we need to prioritize the focus on the most vulnerable population and to expand programs aimed to this population. In that regard, we made a list of the rights that were strongly vulnerable that have to do with the Center of Education of Early Childhood, the Family Accompaniment Program of Uruguay, expanding adolescent mental health services, strengthen dietary responses that at this moment have decreased, but the economic situation continues to be complicated in the national care system with regards to response to the labor market insertion of women with dependent children. I think that that's it. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Georgina, for sticking to time. So now we're going to close this round with, because we have passed our time, we're going to cancel the final round there because the words have been, with the presentation have been so rich, and what you have shared, just preliminary information. The important is to highlight the process, the possibility of dialogue and understanding. Understand that there are similarities and differences in the discourse, which is the expression of the similarities and differences that exist in and between countries. But in terms of rights, there are no borders. In child rights, there are no borders, and this is the linking element that calls us to continue working on this rich space. So on my side, thank you, our colleagues. I will turn the floor now to our moderator, Yadira. So we close this stage of the presentation to move on with the other activities and close this important activity. Thank you, Raúl, for your excellent moderation, and to all the speakers from the Social Pediatric Committee from ALAPE, Virginia, Ivan, Ernesto, Paul, Berta Luz, Georgina. And I'm just going to highlight some things that you presented in the frame of guaranteeing the rights of children, and with the response of the states about the Convention of the Rights of the Child on the intrinsic right to life, to survival, education, healthcare, optimal healthcare, and above everything, to defend the superior interests of the child. One of the lessons is that during the crisis, we need to protect the childhood and have policy and resources that guarantee the comprehensive rights of children and adolescents. Before continuing the program, we thank for all those who have joined us from Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Venezuela, and from Argentina, Mexico, Uruguay, Cuba, Spain, Paraguay, and the US. Also to the institutions from the GESA-MINSA, Ventanilla Hospital, Peruvian Red Cross, the Loaiza Hospital, CONA, the Roundtable to Fight Against Poverty, the World Food Program, the Cauca Governance, the University of Cajamarca, among others. Continuing with the agenda and to listen the voices and hear the comments of the children and adolescents of the Consultative Councils of Children and Adolescents of Peru. We welcome Adriana and welcome Xiomara. Go ahead, dear Xiomara. Good evening to everyone. Thank you very much. I'm Xiomara Roca. I'm 14 years old, and I represent the Consultative Council of Children and Adolescents, known as CONA, in our country. At this moment, I'm going to present a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to share it to indicate what this organization is and how it brings the voice of girls, boys, and adolescents. Can you see my slide? Yes, go ahead. Thank you. So we'll start. I mentioned what CONA is. This is the Consultative Council of Boys, Girls, and Adolescents. It exists as such since 2009. CONA is a space of consultative participation made up by boys, girls, and adolescents between 9 and 17 years with no differentiation with terms of race, education, etc. It's an inclusive space. This space contributes to a communication in a more coordinated with authorities of the Ministry of Women and Vulnerable Populations at national level, which is a public institution of the state that supports us, such as local authorities, such as district municipalities and provincial municipalities and regions. The goal of CONA is to make our voice be listened in order to guarantee that our rights of girls, boys, and adolescents, considering our needs and aspirations. Some functions of CONA. Among the most important, we have to prepare and present proposal for policies in terms of childhood and adolescence until the General Director of Boys, Girls, and Adolescents in the Ministry of Women and Vulnerable Populations. Another important function that we need to highlight is to demand the compliance, the enforcement of rights of girls, boys, and adolescents with the institutions who work in this area. As Berta mentioned, these institutions can be the roundtable, the ministry, and the different ministries of health, of the interior, etc. Another fundamental function is to issue their opinion about the consultations on politics of childhood and adolescence. And it's very important to comment, to issue our opinion in public policy that affect us or affect our rights. Also, another important function is to monitor all public policy proposals that affect our interests. And this is linked to what I mentioned before about issuing our opinion. And to go to a more concrete area during the pandemic, the several speakers mentioned, boys, girls, and adolescents, we go through a number of issues and problems that we already had for a long time or started in 2021 or 2020 during the pandemic, but in some actions that I'm going to comment had the intention from the CONA advisors to counteract this. For example, we have the survey for perception of girls, boys, and adolescents in the context of COVID-19 when we're just starting the pandemic, so we can make a diagnosis and our participation will not be affected. We created video and message from CONA with recommendations I stay at home. With the national campaign was launched. So these messages and videos and this campaign with recommendation that I stay at home, we're looking that the advisor from their position of both girls and adolescents could recommend and invite their peers at the national level could continue to take care of themselves and keep safe during the pandemic so their rights could not be affected. Another important action is that throughout the 2 years of the pandemic, we opened a section in the CONA called I Apprend with CONA. These were workshops where we, from our different experiences and learnings, we could share our knowledge to more boys, girls, and adolescents, and perhaps in this way, they could feel more identified because it was not given by an adult and it was a child, so there was more fluid communication and they had a good time. Similarly to the previous activities, very important to comment are these conversations of Comuna Peru with different organizations about different topics. We can see, for example, we've had conversations on participation, protection of our rights, about information about the threats in social networks and prevention of trafficking, human traffic. We also carry out some activities in the digital world with regards to commemoration days, such as the Week of the Rights of the Child. This happened in 2020, and this year we are preparing a collage with regarding to this date. And to conclude this part, it's very important to comment that a very important channel that we were able to inaugurate in Kona was Noti Kona, which was a newscast. It's a micro newscast that has the purpose of informing about the news of each region, but it's not conducted by adults, but done by us. We report, we do the recordings, and then it's posted for authorities, adults, and members of the CONA and others. So we promote participation and protection of our rights in a safer way. This has been my presentation of today. Somewhat technical part, but now I'm going to give the floor to Adriana from the CONA Ayacucho so she can continue with some other comments. Thank you. Thank you, Xiomara. A brief summary just to mention some of the actions to counteract the impact of pandemic, such as the communication campaign and the virtual workshop in peer learning and digital mobilization, and of course, with this Noticona initiative. And now Ariadna has the floor. Ariadna, welcome. You have the space. Good evening. Thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Ariadna. I'm 17 years old. I'm from the CONA Ayacucho, and I'm also part of the National CONA. I don't know if you could show my presentation, please. I'm going to talk about the 8th General Assembly of the Advisory Council for Children and Adolescents, CONA. Next. What is the General Assembly of the Advisory Council of Boys, Girls, and Adolescents? Every year, representatives of the national level get together in the National Assembly of the Advisory Council for Children and Adolescents. In this space, they discuss about the challenges that boys, girls, and adolescents have in the country, in addition to propose solutions to the problems. And number 3, the input collected in the assembly are used to build a national agenda for boys, girls, and adolescents. What are the major problems? The one that we have identified by meeting with all the regions have been the education problem, where we found the following issues, which is school harassment, bullying, and cyberbullying in schools. The limited quality education. And what else? Just give me a minute here. And school dropout. The proposed solutions to promote safe spaces free of violence with the support of the educational community and school brigades. Because of time, I'm going to go directly to the next problem. Health is another problem affected by this pandemic. The increase in mental health issues affecting children and adolescents. The high rate of teenage pregnancies, as well as the disappearance of children and adolescents. The proposed solutions that we propose as CONA to conduct innovative and dynamic talks, workshops, and webinars that promote the exchange of opinions to raise awareness, boys, girls, and adolescents, and authorities with the support of the mental health psychology area. Dissemination of information in educational institutions to promote the management of the use of cameras of other means to ensure the safety of children and adolescents, preventing their disappearance. The next, please. In the agenda, we also consider climate change, which has also been affected by this pandemic, where we found the solutions that institutions should report about climate crisis and at the same time encourage children and adolescents to be agents of change. Next slide. Participation. Authorities do not encourage the participation of children and adolescents in issues that affect them. Our solution proposals that we found are that mayors and authorities should promote spaces for participation, carrying out actions so that children and adolescents can express their voices freely in training, peaceful demonstrations, or other spaces. The next slide. Protection, increase in family, physical, psychological, and virtual violence affecting boys, girls, and adolescents. Proposed solutions are the following: inform and orient through talks, parents in schools, to orient children, parents, and teachers about effects of violence and provide psychological counseling to affected children. The next problem. That's it. We finished with this problem, which is one of the ones that most affect us in the entire country and also at the international level, which are problems that affect us and we don't have the support of the authorities because they feel that because we are adolescents, we don't have a voice. Well, it's the opposite. We, the adolescents, teach the adults. Thank you. Thank you, dear Ariana. Just to highlight some of what you commented, the space that promotes the promotion in the National Assembly where you collect part of the challenges that all boys, children and adolescents, I will briefly mention some of them. Focus on education, health, climate change, participation and protection. Part of these problems that you identified also were collected and commented by the expanded committee that a few minutes ago introduced you. I would like in this intergenerational dialogue promote active exchange between everyone present in this virtual space. So I'm going to ask all of you to activate your video. I would like to ask Xiomara and Ariana, you have the opportunity to comment, to make a comment or any question or some specific interest to any of the speakers that was presenting the problems of their own countries. While you perhaps are encouraged to ask, I will read some of the comments that I found in the chats, and perhaps you can start the discussion with all the colleagues. Xiomara, go ahead. Yes, thank you for giving us this attention in this technical area about CONA, which is an important space to support the participation of children and adolescents in Peru. And about following on the study that was performed in our country and all the information that you have provided today in this event, I coincide that the problems in different countries in Latin America have been almost the same. And in that regard, I think that each country has given a different priority order according to their own needs. However, I also coincide that all the countries in this consensus of having the same problems on the table, and I'm going to pay attention to this dialogue. This dialogue become much richer because I believe that the joint effort with the concrete actions that we can take to counteract these issues and provide solutions and guarantee the defense of the rights of children and adolescents. So I haven't had an experience like this one of listening so many speakers from different countries and to hear different positions and visions. And I think that that has enriched the space from very distant places and perceptions that are very remote in terms of space and time. But I think that we're all together in the same thought of defending the rights of children and adolescents, moreover when these have been vulnerable or touched in these 2 years of pandemic, 2020 and 2021, that it is true, as you mentioned, many boys, girls, and adolescents in families who don't have resources and are poor were more vulnerable. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to speak more about CONA and also this part of giving my thought. Thank you. Thank you, Xiomara. Ariadna, would you like to make any question or comment? Or just you can share your experience of what you've gone through the pandemic and how have you been vulnerable and about your experience in CONA. Thank you very much. Yes, the experience that I went through the pandemic was quite strong because it was a problem that affected all of us worldwide. And the speakers are the well connected because you almost mentioned the same problems that you have suffered, and they're all being quite related. And since I started working in CONA, we have worked in making the respecting the rights of children and adolescents by listening to our voices. And I'm very happy to participate in these type of events because I learn more and I can teach those who are in my surroundings in Ayacucho and in the National CONA to share with them about my experience and to thank each one of you because I've learned a little from each one of you, of each country, where you mentioned very important things that I was very alert and taking notes, and thank you from CONA and to thank each one of you for providing that orientation. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to read some of the comments that we know. This is children and adolescents are exposed to new risk factors and they need a coordinated effort in the sectors besides health. We will need to coordinate and be alert on our surroundings to see how to act in different situations. That the rights of children and adolescents are not dead letter. To look after the rights of children and adolescents at this moment, we live in different risk factors and we should make sure about their global care, and the mental health was all neglected. And of course that we need new reforms for education, recreation, and health protection. Now I would like to thank Soriana and Xiomara and Ariadna for this space, and we will reflect on their comments and continue promoting the participation on the space and promotion of the rights. So I'll just ask, in 1 minute, could you leave us a final message, some thoughts or comment, what you best consider? I think this is a very important space because we have this intergenerational dialogue. So Xiomara and Ariadna, you have 1 minute for your final message. Who wants to go first? Can I? I'll start. Sure, go ahead. A very encouraging message is briefly that I admire the effort and work done today of sharing and summarizing and to report other countries about their problems. because I think it's very important not only to learn or what are our problems or our surroundings, but also to learn about other positions, other perspectives from other children and adolescents from other countries. I think that it is extremely important because allow us to propose from our advisory council to provide better solutions or more universal solutions that can not only apply in our country, but can also be applied in the other countries. And in this way, all the joint efforts that are executed are done in a better way. So that's my final message. I admire your space. I thank, I value, and I'm very happy. Thank you. Thank you, Xiomara. Go ahead, Ariadna. Well, this is a phrase that they told me that we're not the future, we are the present, and that we are building our own future. And I think that we, as Xiomara mentioned, we thank for this space because we take important teaching from you. You're trying to promote your values, and we can teach the ones that are in our surroundings and to work together with all of you for our rights. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And following this, and because we're running out of time, to present the reflections from the analysis of the results, I would like to welcome Ernesto Rodriguez. Welcome, Ernesto, you have the space. Go ahead.
Muchas gracias. ¿Me escuchan bien?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
¿Me escuchan? ¿Sí? Okay.
Yes, we hear you.
Creo que ha sido una
I think
jornada larga, pero muy
it's been a
productiva.
long
Hemos tenido excelentes
day.
presentaciones.
You have excellent presentations,
El trabajo ha sido muy intenso.
intense work.
Lo que se ha planteado es apenas una
What
muestra
has been
de
proposed is just a
muchos
sample
tipos de
of how
información,
much has been collected in the reports.
de todo esto va a
So
ser
the final
un buen
publication
aporte en esta
is going to be a great contribution in this issue.
Creo que
I don't
ya
like to abuse time. We have exceeded our time,
puedo decir que
but just to say
en
that
los informes que hemos ido elaborando
in the reports that we have been generating
marco este proyecto, en el marco de este
under
estudio,
this study,
hay muchas semejanzas,
there's a lot of similarities, but there are also many differences.
algo que
So
lo central es
the
cómo logramos
core here
ahora,
is
digamos,
how
hacer
can we from now
una
on
interpretación, un poco
make
más,
a more rigorous interpretation of all these
en todos los
trends.
países hemos tenido
In all our countries, we have an
de aumento de la violencia,
increase of
hemos
violence.
tenido,
We've had
digamos, también aumentos vinculados con
an increase related.
la, no puedo, disculpen, me estoy...
No te hagas problema, Ernesto. Estamos en familia, así que
Disculpen,
esto
estoy en una-
Ernesto, don't worry.
Guatemala, en una
I'm in Guatemala
eh,
in parallel meetings
por varias cosas a la vez.
and
Eh,
by several things at the same time.
Lo que quería decir es,
In any case, what I wanted to mention is that we had several common issues, of course,
aumentado los niveles de violencia,
increase of the levels of violence
sentidos,
in many
hemos tenido
sense.
impactos muy
We've had
grandes en materia educativa.
major impact in
El
education,
encierro ha incidido muy
so
fuertemente
the
en
confinement has
y
affected
también a
this,
veces hemos tenido matices
and also we had
violencias.
differences.
El ha aumentado en algunos países.
Child labor has increased in many countries, not in others.
Los temas vinculados con
The issues related to the participation have been more promoted in some than in others, and so on.
si algo nos deja
So
el
it's
conjunto de estudios
something
que hemos hecho,
we can get from this
tendencias
set of studies. All these trends
están muy correlacionadas con
are correlated
digamos,
strongly
los sistemas de protección social
with the social protection system that exists in our countries, the social investments,
y así en otros planos similares.
and other similar planes. And I think that what it shows is that indeed in those countries who had better social protection systems, did more social investments, these issues
Impactos más
have
acotados que en aquellos países que
less impact than those countries who have
y con inversiones
poor social protection systems.
sociales también más acotadas.
and more limited investments. In the future, this sets us a road in terms of the challenges are not going to limit to specific topics of one area or another, that the impact of the syndemia in the rights of children and adolescents, but we're going to have to work all together. And that means that we're going to be able to have a response that are in tune with this type of challenges. None of the rights of children and adolescents is going to have full force if we don't increase and improve our social protection system, if we don't invest more and better in different population sectors. And if we assume that indeed we need to work with an intergenerational perspective. In the social difference that exists shows us that in the group of children and adolescents, there are problems that present in a more intense way. It's not just that the pandemic has impacted more in the most vulnerable families and less in the less vulnerable. You also have gender difference, territorial difference, ethnic differences, generational differences, and all of this need to be properly cared for in the future under the frame of this type of efforts. And I think that we need more than ever to continue working in these spaces of knowledge exchange with more participation of children and adolescents, and trying to value where there have been greater efforts and where less efforts, and many times don't match, and the results have been better, or there have been important delays. There are some countries where things have become more severe, but has to do with more general things of the dynamic of our societies and not of the efforts of the government, for example, for trying to limit the impact, differential impacts in our populations. And in others, there's been the opposite trend. There's been very few efforts from the governments, but the problems had less impact, to say it somewhere. And all that needs to be adequately interpreted to work in the future. I think that there's a number of lessons learned, and I will summarize it, that we also need to work in the future in building, developing, and strengthening of the care systems that allow us to work with gender perspective, to strengthen women that take care of children and adolescents, and also the elderly or sick persons, valuing their work and with proper pay, so we can improve the rights of children and adolescents, not acting only directly on children and adolescents, but on their family surroundings, community surroundings, and so on. I think that the laws exist. We need to enforce them, and it's not a challenge that we need to start enacting laws, but see how we allocate more resources to these public policies that increase the rights. Challenges that I think that can be fully acted upon if we assume that we continue with the pandemic, and the pandemic is going to be here with us, and it's going to affect these processes. Raul mentioned something that's very important, that the center of our effort is not in the infected, but in those affected. And that is not just a simple play of words, it's a conception of how to work in these issues. I think that that is extremely relevant, major learning that we have able to accumulate in this collective study, where I think we made a lot of progress in this field. We, of course, need to do more studies. Now we're going to look at the social outlook for Latin America focus in education. We have more information from ECLAC, just to mention one of them in these matters. And so we can continue moving ahead in what we have been pushing from the professional actions of some of our colleagues who were directly with pediatrics, as well as those who be deployed from any other profession in this subject. I think that there's a major challenge that for these topics are not becoming visible, not are covered by the hate speech, and not become more acute with the conflicts and are not conditioned, that we need to invest in other sectors, and therefore we need to defend this population sector that is strategic from all point of view from our countries. The full rights of children and adolescents is not just a way of being coherent and consistent with establishing crisis. This population sector must be able to deploy their efforts, work together in function of developing our countries. Thank you. Thank you, Ernesto, for your insights. We continue in pandemic. Well, we run out of time for this space, so we apologize for everyone in this room. Just to thank you, all the panel members, the expanded social pediatric committee, to all of you, and of course, to Ariana and Samara from the CONA, Peru, to all the attendees, to the Horas CONU team, all the people who participate in this activity that it was possible, and to the community with Andean integration and Latin American integration. So now, Dr. Maria Carmen Calle has the floor for closing this forum on behalf of the Horas CONU. Go ahead, Dr. Calle. Thank you, Yadira. One of my first words to thank, deeply thank all those present, especially to Ariadna, who just tells us that nothing is for us without us. As Bertita mentioned, I've been working for so many years in this, and everything that needs to be done is for them, with them, and for them, and with children and adolescents. I would also like special thanks to Xiomara and to the entire group. I won't forget anyone, Ivan, Raúl, Virginia, Mirta, Georgina, Paul, Ernesto, Bertita, Gather, Ernesto Duran, Ivan. I don't want to forget anyone, because yes, our conversations have been so rich. I'm a pediatrician. I'm very proud of my profession. I always start by saying that I'm a pediatrician. Dr. Calle, your mic, you need to. I am convinced that we need to invest in boys, girls, and adolescents. And in Peru, we always say, without budget, there are no rights. That needs to be a special, differentiated way, and that the most important frame has been mentioned by everyone is social protection. If we don't have better protection, social protection systems, we're in trouble. And we're not talking about this health and education. There are many areas that must be considered, and that the right to education is the right that has more rights, and the education topic is very strong in our countries. And we'll see this report from ECLAC, what it tells us about education. I know they're going to be catastrophic. I don't need to read it. I know what's coming. And we need to recover, because as it was mentioned in February of 2020 paper, that we have to have healthy, educated, listen to, that exercise their rights and that are treated fairly, children and adolescents. The 54 articles tell us a lot of things, but let's not forget of the general observations that tell us many other things, many more things. In the general observations, we cannot leave mention, have to mention that terms of networks, defense, adolescents, family planning. So we have world frames, we have regional frameworks, we have national frameworks that are quite strong, but Bertita mentioned we need to implement them because everything is written, but at the end of the day, that doesn't become a reality. Let's not say that we haven't made any progress. Some progress we've made, and that was demonstrated that there were something done with countries in this population. In PAHO, that review Peru, Colombia policies. It is true that in this pandemic, they were invisible, but it is also true that there's the group of young and adolescents and children who are participating, especially to make their rights being respected. And I think that one of the most vulnerable rights is the right to participation. It's one of the most vulnerable rights. Whatever, we have successful experiences that we know that need to improve, but there are certain type of experience in our countries. It is important that we have a lot of data. In this study, there's a lot of data. Data needs to be converted by showing us their lessons and challenges into information that can serve us, but not to us, but mostly to children and adolescents. There's an issue of terminology. I talk about project of life. Now you better use intergenerational approach. Well, someday we'll come to agreement. But the thing is that everything that happens in childhood is going to mark the future. But nothing is determinant. I have the experience of working almost a decade in with children who were fully full of risk factors and vulnerability, and however many of them made it in progress. So I think that this marks their future, but definitely we need to improve, and we need to improve the conditions where children and adolescents live. We need to listen to intersectionality. We cannot forget that there is a number of characteristics that contribute to marginalization of many important groups of children and adolescents. And the authorities are responsible, but also the groups such as ours, which is the group of social pediatrics of the Latin American Association of Pediatrics. I started here about 7 years ago. We attended the World Congress with Raúl and Ernesto, Mariluchan from Peru, and there we learned a lot in the sense that our pediatricians, and I'm speaking about a pediatrician, that our pediatricians need to have training in social area. We cannot continue having pediatricians that are important of signs, symptoms, and clinics. We need to have people that are prepared in a social context, in what means to be born here or there. And I will end up saying what I always mention, because someday you will listen to me repeating what a Peruvian adolescent in 2018. The only thing that we ask is a safe environment. Safe. What do you mean by safe? right? With no violence, no human trafficking, no cyberbullying, a safe environment. That each morning I can have sufficient food with no food insecurity, right? Am I right? That's what we're talking about. And the most important thing to equality. They're not asking nothing special. The only thing that they ask is that the floor be the same for everyone, regardless of where they've been born. And I think that from the Andean Health Organization, from the Pan American Health Organization Sub-Regional Problem, and the expanded Committee of Social Pediatrics, we will continue working to contribute to that. I would like to share with you that the agreement is going to be signed in the coming days, the agreement between ALAPE, the Latin America Society of Pediatrics, and the Andean Health Organization, Equality to Nano Agreement. Thank you very much. I won't see you Thursday because we're going to attend the health minister meetings on the Andean regions. We're going to start a strong work tomorrow and the day after tomorrow with the coordination technical committee to look at the Andean resolutions, to continue with our strategic plan. And on Friday, we will have the meeting with the ministries of health from the Andes. Ecuador, which is the pro tempore chairman, is transferring the presidency to Peru. In other words, we're going to have a pro tempore presidency in Peru. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you, Bertita. Thank you, Yadira, and to the entire Horas con New Equipment that makes these webinars possible. So we can make that knowledge and experiences to more people in our region. Fully convinced, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela, together we're stronger, together we reach farther. Good afternoon, good evening.